Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Tashi, and on this channel I like to talk about all things crochet. Vlogs, tutorials, market preps, market vlogs, literally anything. So if that's something you're interested in seeing, subscribe to my channel and follow along for more videos. But in today's video, I'm not gonna ramble too much because we have a really fun crochet tutorial for you guys. I have my very own granny square crochet croc cover. It is super beginner friendly. It is the most easiest crochet pattern ever. Let's get started. Materials you'll be using for this tutorial are a pair of Crocs. I have a size 8 women's pair of Crocs, but we are going to be using a 2.5 for this pattern. Again, this 2.5 is good for a size 6 woman pair of Crocs all the way to a size 9. You'll be using 5 different colors for this tutorial. You can use more or less. This is just the color palette that I went with. Have all of your 5 colors in the front granny square, and then in your triangles, some will only have 3 and some will only have 4 colors. And you can mix and match the colors how you'd like, but this is roughly what it would look like. This is not the pattern we're going to be doing. I have altered this pattern so that it fits better on the croc, and this is just my rough draft, but I wanted you to see how it would look with the small triangle, the big triangle, and the big granny square. You'll be needing a pair of scissors, a tapestry needle, and some type of thread to sew your patches onto your Crocs. I have a full in-depth video of how to sew your patches or your crochet onto your Crocs, so I will link that down below in the description box for you guys. I have here embroidery yarn that is 100% cotton, just so that it doesn't break on me. This is what I always use for all my Croc orders. So to begin, we're going to take our middle color of our granny square, and that is just this color in the middle that's going to go here. I have this maroon color. To start, we're going to make a slip knot. So to do so, you're going to go ahead and put your yarn over your 2 fingers, hold with your thumb, go around the back, cross it over in the front, flip your fingers, hold with your ring finger, and take your pinchers. Go under this first loop, grab this back loop, and pull it through, and remove those fingers as you're doing that. You're going to have this loop. Go ahead and attach your hook into that loop and pull your 2 tail ends tight like that. And I'm using the chain 2 method, not the magic circle, just because I do not want it to open up on me. A chain 2. And then in this first chain, that's where I'm going to start working all of my stitches to begin my granny square. So we're just doing 3 double crochets into this first stitch here, this first chain. So to make a double crochet, you're going to yarn over, insert your hook into that first chain, pull up a loop. You should have 3 loops on your hook, and you're going to pull through, yarn over and pull through the first 2, yarn over and pull through the last 2. So that's 1 double crochet. You're just going to go ahead and make 2 more double crochets into that same first chain to make your first cluster of 3 double crochets. If you know how to make a granny square already, you can go ahead and just make a granny square with 5 rows. Now that I have my 3 double crochets, I'm going to go ahead and chain 2 to split my next cluster. And now I'm going to just repeat this process again, making 3 double crochets into this same chain 1 space that we worked all of our first cluster of 3 double crochets. So again, I'm going into that same space there and working 3 more double crochets all into that same first chain. Like that. And then again, I'm going to chain 2 to separate my clusters. And now I'm just going to make 2 more clusters for a total of 4 clusters with a chain 2 in between each cluster. That's my 3, and then now I'm just making 1 more cluster and chaining 2 at the end of that cluster to finish off this round. Now, preferably, I just snip off my color that I'm working with and just reattach. And I'll show you how to do that. But if you want to color change, you can do that as well. But I am very lazy, so I will not be doing that. But from here, once I have my 4 clusters with my chain 2 in the middle and you're ending on a chain 2, you're going to go ahead and slip stitch into the top of that first double crochet right here. You're going to insert your hook into that V-stitch, pull up a loop, and slip stitch like that. And I like to slip stitch all the way to a corner when I'm making my granny squares, just because it's easier for me to weave in my ends and change my colors as I go. So I'm just going to be slip stitching all the way to my chain 2 corner. So now I'm going to go ahead and pull up a loop, chain 1, pull up that loop, and I'm just going to cut off that color, pull that off, and that is the beginning of my granny square. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and attach my new color into this same chain 2 space. I like all of my tail ends on the same side, just so it's easier for me to tie off and weave in my ends. So we're going to be doing the same step every single time we attach a new color. We're just going to make a slip knot onto our hook and attaching right in that corner. So again, a slip knot, insert your hook, and we're going to go ahead and attach right into this chain 2 space there. Insert your hook, pull up a loop, and slip stitch. So that's how I like to attach mine. Again, you can color change if you'd like. From here, I'm going to chain 2, and that's going to count as my first double crochet in this corner space. So from here, you're going to yarn over, insert your hook, and make a double crochet. You're going to chain 2 and make another 2 double crochets into this same space. And this is just creating a corner of your granny square. And now from here, you're going to chain 2 and repeat the same process in every single corner, making 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets into every single chain 2 space of the previous round. And I'll do some on camera with you. There is a slow down button on the right hand corner of this video for you to slow it down and rewind as much as needed so that you can get the hang of this. But from here, we went ahead and made another corner. We're going to chain 2 and make another corner. So you're just going to repeat this process all the way around, making 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets, all into the same corner space, and then you're going to chain 2 to move on to the next corner. Now, I know some people just like to chain 1 or skip the chaining part in between the clusters. Preferably, that's just how I like to make my granny squares. You don't have to. You can make your granny squares how you like if you know how to make them. So I'm chaining 2, and then now I am slip stitching to the top of this chain 2 that we started with. Like that. And then I'm going to slip stitch into this chain 2 space, chain 1, pull up a loop, and cut off my yarn. I'm going to grab my new yarn color and attach with a slip knot into the space that we just fastened off with our previous color, to attach with a slip stitch here. And then I'm going to chain 2 to start, and that counts as my first double crochet of this corner space here. You're going to make a corner space, which again is just 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets. And then to move on to the next space, you're going to chain 2 or chain 1, whichever one you prefer. Now we're going to be making a side cluster before we get to our next corner, and in each round, this side cluster is going to increase by 1. So to make a side cluster, you're going to go ahead and just make 3 double crochets into this chain 2 space in every single side between your corners. So you're just going to make 3 double crochets into that space, and that is going to be your side cluster. Again, you're going to chain 2 to move on to your next clusters. Now you're going to make a corner, which again is just 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets all into that same spot. And then once you're done, you're going to chain 2 and then go ahead and make a side. And that is going to be the pattern all the way around. Okay, so again, once you've made your last side cluster, you're going to go ahead and chain 2, and you're going to slip stitch to the top of this chain 2 that we began with, and you're going to slip stitch into that chain 2 space, pull up a loop, and fasten off for that round. And now you're just going to repeat those same steps for the next 2 colors of your granny square. You're just going to make side spaces where the side spaces are and corner spaces where the corner spaces are. So since we are attaching here, we're going to make a corner here, a side space, chain 2, another side space, and then another corner space. And then once you're done with that, you're going to be increasing your side space for your last round to 3 side spaces and 4 corner spaces. Once you finish, this is what your granny square should look like. Now I'm just going to go ahead and weave in my ends. I don't think too much on this. I personally just tie off my knots. For the outer one, I will weave in those ends just because those ones are on the outside and I do not want my ends to show like this. So what I do is I take my tapestry needle. If you do not know how to weave in ends, I'll go ahead and thread that on. I'll go into the stitch next to my chain 2, so I'll just go right here, go down into that stitch, flip it over onto the back, and I'll weave down into my double crochets. So like this. Like that. And I'll do the same thing with this white one here. I'll go ahead and thread that on and go down into my double crochet stitches. Like so. And then I will just snip off the excess yarn like that. Okay, so that is what my granny square looks like. And you're just going to go ahead and repeat this process for a whole nother granny square before we move on to the triangles. So for the triangles, you're going to go ahead and start with your middle color again, a slip knot, and attach that to our hook. We're going to chain 2. Again, this is what I prefer. I'm going to make 3 double crochets into that first chain like we did with the granny square. So that's 1, 2, and 3. So now I'm just going to chain 2, and I'm just going to make one more cluster into this chain 1 space. Just going to be splitting our granny square in half, so it's just going to be half of the clusters. So for me, I like to color change on my triangles. I do not like to finish off and fasten off. So to color change, you're just going to make a unfinished double crochet, so yarn over, insert your hook, pull through 2 loops, but don't pull through the last 2. I'm going to snip off my yarn, and I'm going to bring in my next color. Lay it onto your hook, and pull it through as if you were finishing off the double crochet with your new color. You'll have 2 tail ends. Usually I just tie these together for a better security, but I'm just going to hold them down while I work on my next row. So to begin, you're going to chain 2, and that's going to count as your double crochet. You're going to flip your work, and you're going to work this way down the row. So you're going to make 2 more double crochets into that very first stitch. So you're going to yarn over into this first stitch, insert your hook, and make a double crochet. and you're going to make one more double crochet in that first stitch. Again, remembering that that chain 2 counts as a double crochet, so that is your first cluster. You're going to chain 2, and now you're going to make a corner space like we did with the granny square. You're going to make 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets into that next chain 2 space, which is just right here, and 2 double crochets again into that same space to make that corner. And you're going to chain 2, and now you're going to work into that very first stitch of your first double crochet of your previous round. So you're going to yarn over, find that first stitch, pop through, and make 3 double crochets into that same first stitch. Again, on your last double crochet, you're going to make an unfinished double crochet, leaving 2 loops on your hook. You're going to fasten off your previous color, and you're going to bring in your next color the same way we did bringing in this yellow color. You're going to lay it over your hook. I hold it with my 2 fingers like this for an easier pull, and you're just going to pull that through like that and pull the 2 tail ends tight onto your hook. If you need more help on color changing, I can link a video down below to a beginner-friendly color changing tutorial, but this is just how I do it. Again, once we've chained 2, we're going to flip our work so that we're working back down this way. That first stitch is going to get 2 double crochets, and that chain 2 that we did counts as a double crochet, so that makes your cluster of 3 double crochets. You're going to chain 2, and you're going to make a side cluster like we did with the granny square, which is just 3 double crochets. Chain 2, and now you're going to make a corner. Chain 2, and you're going to make another side cluster. And now for our last cluster of this round, we're just going to make 3 double crochets into the top of that very top of that chain 2. And you're just going to make 3 double crochets into that same space. Last double crochet, you're going to do an unfinished double crochet, snip off that yarn, and bring in your last color of this triangle. Lay it over your hook and pull through the 2 loops. And you're going to repeat this same process that we did with the previous round. So chaining 2, which is going to count as our first double crochet, we're going to flip the work, 2 double crochets into that first stitch. And now you're going to make 2 side clusters and then a corner, 2 side clusters, and then your last cluster of that round. You're going to chain 1 and fasten off. So for my triangles, I do tie off my knots at the bottom, and then I do weave them in. So to do that, I just take my 2 colors of my color changing and I tie them off like this. So once I tie them off, I do take my tapestry needle and I just weave in my ends, making sure that all my ends are facing the back of my triangle, just for a cleaner look. Then we will move on to the final triangle, which is the smaller triangle, and after that we will be assembling the final patch together. For the smaller triangle, we're just going to be taking off a row to make it a smaller triangle. Instead of 4 rows, we're just going to have 3 rows. So for me, I'm just going to be doing maroon, this yellow, and I'm going to skip over the green and go straight to the cream color for my 3 rows on my triangle. Will not go in depth just because it is the same process on making the triangle, just taking off a row. So once you finished your tiny triangle and you finish your 3 patches, you're going to go ahead and take the same color yarn of your outer color of your granny square, about a arm's length or a little bit longer. And we're gonna start sewing the patches together before we sew them onto the Crocs. So I'm using a mattress stitch for this. I'm gonna go over how to do a mattress stitch, but not in depth. Start in this corner, work our way to the top, and work our way back down. So as you can see, this triangle is very small compared to this long row. So we're going to be skipping stitches as we go. And I'll walk you through that so you guys aren't lost. But again, we're going to start with the smaller triangle and the granny square side together first. I'm going to go ahead and remove this bigger triangle, and we're just going to focus on this small triangle. We're going to attach in this chain 2 corner with this last double crochet of this stitch. Again, you can see the comparison in size, but we're going to skip some stitches here to line up the 2 patches. So to start, you're going to go ahead and take your needle and you're going to go down into this chain 2 like so. You're going to go into the stitch and go down, leaving about a decent tail to weave in at the end, about this much. And you're going to go up into the next chain 2 stitch. So you're going to go up into that V like this, pull through, and you're going to repeat that same process going down into this first one and up into the second one to make a knot. So we're going to go down into the first chain 2 and then back up into the second chain 2. Again, I will link an in-depth video in my description box for you guys on how to do the mattress stitch, and it goes over attaching the beginning of the mattress stitch for you. So once you've attached your yarn into that chain 2 corner, you're going to bring in your triangle and you're going to attach the same way we did here, but do not repeat it. You're just going to go down into this first stitch like this. Pull that through, and then into the next stitch, you're going to go up. So up into the next stitch like that. And then you're going to move back over to this one here. We're going to skip 1 stitch and go into the next, so into this chain 2 space. We're going to go down into the chain 2 and back up into the next one. And we're going to be pulling a little bit so that we connect the 2 patches together. And in this one, we're not going to be skipping any stitches in the small triangle just because we want to use up every single stitch so that it lines up with the square. So in here, we're going to go ahead and go into this next stitch, go down, and then back up into the next one. Pull that through. And then again, we're going to skip a stitch here and go into the next one. We're going to go down into the stitch and up into the next one like this. Pull that through. We're not going to skip a stitch on the triangle side. We're going to go right into the next stitch. Pull that through. And now you can see this webbing starting to happen. You can go ahead and pull your tail end to pull that tight like that. Again, we're going to be skipping this stitch here, going into the next one, and we're going to go down and then up into the next stitch. And again, on this side, we're not skipping stitches, and we're going to go down and then up. Again, we're going to skip and go into the next one. We're going to go down and then up. And you're just going to repeat this process all the way to the top of these patches, skipping a stitch on the longer side and not skipping stitches on the little triangle. Again, skipping a stitch, going into the next one. So we're skipping this one, we're going into this chain 2 space, pulling that through, and then now we're just going to go into that last stitch right there in that chain 2, the top of the chain 2 of that triangle. We're going to go down into that stitch, pull that through, and I like to go back down into this stitch here, this chain 2 at the top. So I'm going to skip this stitch like we have been doing, going into the next one. We're going to go down and then up into that chain 2 space. Pull that through, pull that tight, and that is how you attach your small triangle. So from here, now that we're at the top of the granny square here, bring in the triangle. You're gonna find that chain 2 space of the corner at the top right here, and you're gonna go down and up into the next chain space like we have been doing, pulling that through. And as you can see, it is a little bit smaller than the square, so we're just gonna skip a couple stitches, but we're not gonna skip a whole lot like we did before the small one. We're gonna skip a stitch, go in down into the next stitch and up into the next stitch like we have been doing, and then repeating the same steps over here, not skipping any stitches on the triangles. And then we're going to skip a stitch, go into the next ones, go down and then up. On your tail end to bring that together. And now we're no longer going to be skipping stitches on the square side. We're just going to be evenly going through the stitches like we have been doing, going down and then up into the next stitch. And you're just going to repeat this process all the way down your side patch here. So now that I'm reaching my end here, I'm just going to go ahead and go into this side space at the bottom, pop my needle through, and then I'm going to go directly into this chain 2 space of this corner, go down and then up, and that is going to be my last joining stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and pull my mattress stitch, and that is what it should look like so far. So to end off this mattress stitch, you're just going to go ahead and, since we ended in this chain 2 corner here and our yarn is coming out of this chain 2 corner, I'm going to go back into this side bottom space of the triangle through, do not pull all the way, and bring my needle back through this loop to create a knot like this. And that is how you finish that off. And now I'm going to flip it over and weave my end in. So I'm just going to go ahead and go through this mattress stitch join here. Pull that through and then fasten off the extra yarn. And I'm going to repeat that same process of weaving in my end over on this tail end where we started. And I'm going to thread that on and go through the bottom of this triangle like that and put my needle back through that loop to create a knot like this. Flip it over and weave in that end. Okay, so that is what your patch should look like. And again, you just want to make a whole nother patch, repeating those same steps so that we can go ahead and attach them to our Crocs. I wanted to mention real fast, when you're sewing together your other patches together, you want to swap sides of the triangles so that you have a left and right foot. So you have this inner corner triangle facing inward, and so does this one. So just make sure you're not copying this same exact patch so that it doesn't look like this. And you want your two little triangles on the inner corner and your big ones on the outer corner so that you have the right shape for your Crocs. We're going to go ahead and sew them onto the Crocs. Again, I have a in-depth tutorial on how to do that on my YouTube channel. I can link it down below for you guys. And grab your right foot and your right foot Croc. And what I usually like to do is stretch it out a little bit just to make sure everything is nice and loose for when we sew it onto the Croc. You're going to put your strap to the back like that, and then it should be a seamless fit onto the Croc. So I like to take my patch all the way above this dotted line right there. When I sew it on, that's where I like it to be, and it will look something like that. Turn your Croc to its side like this. Now for the length of your thread, you just want to do about an arm's length or enough to go around and a little bit extra, just because we are going around the whole entire Croc and then we're going up along the top also. So what I like to do is hold this in place, and for reference I'm using a 28 gauge, but you can really use any type of needle that you have from a 26 to a 28 gauge. It's going to be a little bit to pop through in the beginning, but once you get the hang of it, it should be pretty simple. So what you're going to do is take your needle and you're going to go from the inside of the Croc and you're going to pop it through into this corner space here. You're going to attach your patch there like this. Sorry, it got a little bit dark. The sun is going away. You're going to pull that through until you have about this much of a tail end to weave in at the end. And what you're going to do is you're going to go back down into your Croc and you're going to go right underneath where we came out of, and you're going to go right above this dotted line here. So you're going to always stay above this dotted line when you're sewing into your Croc. So you're going to go down into the Croc. Again, I have an in-depth video on my channel if you want to check that out. And then you're just going to go ahead and take your two tail ends. Oops, let me pull that. You're going to take your two tail ends and you're just going to tie a knot in a very secured knot. So pull tight. I'm going to double knot that. And then now it's fairly simple. You're just going to keep going along the edge, making sure you're sewing onto the crochet also. And you're just going to go about an inch apart. So you're going to go, so we just came out through here. We're going to go right into this green double crochet. So you're going to pop through, making sure you're staying above this dotted line. You're going to attach, pull that through, and then you're going to go about an inch over from there and pop right back through the Croc like that. Pull that through and making sure you're pulling tight so you don't see any of your thread. And you're just going to continue this all the way around, going about an inch apart and through the crochet patch and going back down again. Pull that through. And you're just going to continue that all the way around. So I'll meet you once I get to this corner over here on attaching that corner and going up along the top of the Croc. And you want to make sure you don't have any gaps like this. You want to make sure when you're going into your Croc, you want to go right there and attach, hook on your crochet so that you don't have any weird gaps or openings. Once you go all the way around your Croc and you've reached this side, you might have a little bit extra of your granny square, and that is perfectly normal. That is okay. What I like to do is just go right into this corner space and just continue to sew that down and sew down. So you see how that's right there? And it might be looking like there's no room and you have to go here. You can just sew back down into that spot. So right here, I'm going to go down, press that down. And then you see how that created a gap right there where we sewed that down right before the croc symbol there. You can go ahead and pop your needle right where that spot is and just hook down the granny triangle. And then you're going to go right next to it and again, just sew it right down. Okay? So now I'm going to start sewing along this trim here just because I like it up. Sorry, there's a motorcycle going by. To bring my patches above this dotted line. So I'm going to pop my needle right above that dotted line, hook on the yarn, and just follow the trim above the dotted line. So I'm going to go right here next to where I just came out of, sew that on, and then just continue that process going along the top of the dotted line all the way till you get to your tail end over here where we started, and then I will show you how to weave in your ends and finish. So when I'm sewing along the top, what I like to do is I like to stick my needle through a stitch and drag it up to where I want it. So once I've dragged it up, I just pop it right through. Again, I'm just popping to where I want the yarn to come up to, and I hook it on, pull through, and then I'm dragging this up to where I want this. So all the way up here, and then I'm popping through up at the top. Going back down for the last time. And now I'm just going to remove my needle, and I'm going to grab my beginning tail end, and I'm going to tie those both off with a knot. Thread that extra thread onto the needle. And what you're going to do is pop through the croc, and you're going to go underneath the patch. So you're going to go underneath and weave underneath and pop your needle through a stitch like this. Oops. And then you're just going to go ahead and cut off this extra yarn. And you're going to repeat the same process with this extra thread here. Again, popping it through, going underneath and weaving in that end and popping through a stitch and cutting off that extra yarn. Bring your strap back up. This is what it should look like. Patching this patch the same exact way. And that is all for this crochet covered croc tutorial. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave a thumbs up. It really helps my channel grow. And if you made one of these crochet covered crocs and you want to send me a pic, my name is Mamma.stitches on Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for future content. But until next time, bye guys!